Once upon a time, there were 4 little brown rabbits. Their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter, and they lived with their mother in a warm, snug hollow at the foot of the big fir tree in the woods. There she kept them brushed and washed, with their whiskers standing straight and fine as a rabbit's whiskers should. "Now, my dears," said Mrs. Rabbit one fine spring day, "out of doors you go. You may play in the lane, or you may run about in the fields, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your poor papa had an accident there. He was caught and put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor. So run along, take care of each other, but don't get into mischief." Now, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were good little rabbits. Their brown coats were smooth and sleek, their little pink paws were clean, and they carried their willow baskets neatly over their arms. Mother Rabbit had said they might pick some blackberries if they saw them by the roadside, but they were to do only as she told them. So they went down the lane, and when they saw some blackberry bushes, they immediately set to work filling their little baskets. But not Peter. He was a very naughty rabbit. As soon as he was sure that they would not see him, he scampered ahead and ran across the fields, right across the green grass, down by the stream, and then up the hill again, right towards Mr. McGregor's garden. There he squeezed himself under the fence and saw before him rows and rows of fresh green vegetables. There were bright orange carrots and green peas and red radishes and white onions. And there was just the kind of crispy green lettuce that Peter liked best. So Peter started in to eat. He ate and he ate and he ate and he ate until his little white fur stomach was round and full and the tip of his pink nose could hardly wiggle. And when he stopped eating, he knew that he had eaten much too much. He'd better nibble a little parsley to make him feel good. So off he went, looking for parsley. But just as he went round the cucumber frame, whom do you think he saw? It was Mr. McGregor. At first, Mr. McGregor didn't see Peter. He was too busy putting in new cabbage plants. He was digging in the dirt and putting in the plants very, very carefully. But all of a sudden, he looked over his shoulder and saw Peter standing there. Up he jumped with a rake in one hand and a flower pot in the other, and he called out, "Stop! Stop!" And he began to run after Peter as fast as he could. Oh, Peter was dreadfully frightened. Shivers ran up and down his back. He ran this way and ran that way, and then he found that he was running around in circles. Oh, he was so frightened. His ears stood up straight in the air, and try as he would, he could not find his way out of the garden. On and on he ran, losing first one shoe among the green beans, and then the other among the radishes. Before he knew it, he had run right into a gooseberry net and was caught fast by the buttons on his jacket. It was a beautiful new jacket. It had big, shining buttons all the way down the front. His mother had just made it for him, and today was the very first time he had worn it. Peter wriggled and wriggled, trying to get out of the net. He soon found the more he wriggled and the more he squirmed, the tighter it held him. Big tears welled up in his eyes and plopped off the end of his unhappy pink nose. Oh, how could he ever get free before Mr. McGregor caught him? 2 little sparrows came twittering by. They told him first to push with his foot and then pull as hard as he could. "That's it. Keep trying," they chirped. So Peter pushed and pulled as hard as he could. He was just about to get free when he saw Mr. McGregor coming behind him with a big net in his hand, which he was going to drop over Peter's head. The sparrows flew around and around in circles and chirped, "Pull, Peter, kick with your feet and you'll get free." Then he gave one push harder than all the rest and wriggled out just in time. But he left his little blue jacket behind him. Off he ran down the garden path. He didn't even stop for a moment to nibble at the carrots or peas. He knew that Mr. McGregor was chasing him and that he still had the big net in his hand. He scampered between the rows of beans as fast as he could go and went straight to the little house where all the garden tools were kept. "I'll run in and hide," he said to himself. "Mr. McGregor won't think of looking there, and I'll be safe enough until he goes." So he ran through the door with a flip of his little white tail. There, standing in the middle of the floor, was a big green watering can. Peter didn't even wait to see if it had any water in it. He just gave an extra big jump and landed plop right inside. He found himself up to his neck in water. Before he had time to jump out again, in came Mr. McGregor, looking for Peter everywhere. That's funny, said Mr. McGregor. I'm sure I saw that silly brown rabbit run in here. I'll find him in no time, and he'll be sorry he ever came into my garden. Every time I catch a rabbit eating my new carrots and beans, I take him home and put him into a rabbit pie. Peter shivered a little when he heard this. He remembered what his mother had said. He certainly didn't want to be popped into a pie and cooked for dinner. Mr. McGregor began turning all the flower pots upside down, looking for Peter's soft brown ears. All of a sudden, Peter sneezed. Achoo! He couldn't help it because the cold water was trickling down his neck. Of course, Mr. McGregor heard him and was after him in no time. But Peter gave a big jump to the windowsill, knocking over all the flower pots as he went by. Oh, Mr. McGregor was mad, and he stopped to pick up the pieces, so Peter got away completely. He ran as fast as he could until he was all out of breath. His little heart was bumping and thumping like an engine under his brown fur coat. But after he had rested a while, it was no louder than a soft pitter-patter. Then Peter began to look about him. Across the garden, he saw a wall with a door in it. If he could only squeeze under that wall, he would be off on the road to home in no time. He could see the lane going straight back to the big woods. All he had to do was follow it, and he would be safe at home again. So over he ran and peeked under. He saw a little mouse come by carrying a fat green bean in her mouth. Peter asked her if there was any other way for him to go home, but she had such a big bean in her mouth that she only looked at him and went on without answering. Peter suddenly felt so sad he began to cry. He was very far from home and it would soon be growing dark. So he tried to find another way out of the garden. One path led him to the pool where the white cat sat watching the goldfish. Peter remembered what he had heard about cats liking to catch little brown rabbits, so he carefully crept away. Then he heard the scratch, scratch, scratch of Mr. McGregor's hoe nearby. Quickly he jumped into a wheelbarrow and peeped over the edge. Yes, there was Mr. McGregor hoeing his onions, and beyond him was the open gate that would take Peter from the garden back to the woods. Peter's whiskers quivered a little, and he gave his white tail an extra little switch as he slipped over the side of the wheelbarrow and began to run quietly between the rows of lettuce. His whiskers twitched as he went along, faster and faster. This time he would surely make it. Mr. McGregor looked up and saw the tips of Peter's brown ears going by. He threw down his hoe and started to run after him. But Peter saw that the gate was close at hand, and faster his brown feet went. Through the garden, across the grass, through the open gate, and down the lane, right into the woods that would lead him home. Just before he turned into his own little grove of fir trees, he looked back to the garden. Mr. McGregor was hanging up the little blue coat with the shining buttons on the top of the hoe to use as a scarecrow, and he had tied on the little shoes Peter had left behind. Peter saw a sparrow sitting on the toe of each one as he crept gently by. Finally, he reached home. He was so tired that he flopped down on the cool dirt floor of the little house in the fir tree and closed his eyes. His mother was cooking supper. She looked over at him, shaking her gray head. "What a tired little rabbit he is," she said. "And he has lost his beautiful new coat and his new shoes. That's the 4th time this month. Oh, Peter, Peter, you are such a naughty little rabbit. There will be no supper for you tonight." So Peter went to bed with nothing for supper but chamomile tea. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, the good little rabbits who had done what their mother had told them, they had a big bowl of milk for supper. And for dessert, they had delicious blackberries and cream.
towns in Brunswick by famous Hanover City. The River Weser, deep and wide, washes its wall on the southern side. A pleasanter spot you never spy. But when begins my ditty, almost 500 years ago, to see townsfolk suffer so from vermin was a pity.
Rats! They fought the dogs and killed the cats and bit the babies in the cradles and ate the cheeses out of the vats and licked the soup from the cook's own ladles, split open the kegs of salted sprats, made nests inside men's Sunday hats, and even spoiled the women's chats by drowning their speaking with shrieking and squeaking in 50 different shops and flats. At last, the people in a body to the town hall came flocking. "'Tis clear," cried they, "our mayor's a noddy, and as for our corporation, shocking to think we buy gowns lined with ermine for dolts that can't or won't determine what's best to rid us of our vermin. Rouse up, sirs, give your brains a racking to find the remedy we're lacking, or, sure as fate, we'll send you packing." At this, the mayor and corporation quaked with a mighty consternation. An hour they sat in council. At length, the mayor broke silence. "It's easy to bid one rack one's brain. I'm sure my poor head aches again. I've scratched it so, and all in vain. Oh, for a trap, a trap, a trap." Just as he said this, what should hap at the chamber door but a gentle tap? "Bless us," cried the mayor. "What's that? Only a scraping of shoes on the mat? Anything like the sound of a rat makes my heart go pit-a-pat." "Come in," the mayor cried, looking bigger. And in did come the strangest figure. His queer long coat from heel to head was half of yellow and half of red. And he himself was tall and thin, with sharp blue eyes, each like a pin, and light, loose hair, yet swarthy skin, no tuft on cheek nor beard on chin, but lips where smiles went out and in. There was no guessing his kith and kin, and nobody could enough admire the tall man in his quaint attire. He advanced to the council table. "Please, your honors," said he, "I'm able, by means of a secret charm, to draw all creatures living beneath the sun that creep or swim or fly or run after me, so as you never saw. And I chiefly use my charm on creatures that do people harm. The mole and toad and newt and viper, and people call me the Pied Piper." And here they noticed round his neck a scarf of red and yellow stripe to match with his coat of the self-same check. And at the scarf's end hung a pipe. And his fingers, they noticed, were ever straying, as if impatient to be playing upon this pipe, as low it dangled over his vesture so old-fangled. "Yet," said he, "poor piper as I am, in Tartary I freed the Cham last June from his huge swarms of gnats. I eased in Asia the Nizam of a monstrous brood of vampire bats. And as for what your brain bewilders, if I can rid your town of rats, will you give me 1,000 guilders?" 50,000 was the exclamation of the astonished mayor and corporation. Into the street the piper stepped, smiling first a little smile, as if he knew what magic slept in his quiet pipe the while. Then, like a musical adept, to blow the pipe his lips he wrinkled, and green and blue his sharp eyes twinkled like a candle flame where salt is sprinkled. And ere 3 shrill notes the pipe uttered, you heard as if an army muttered. And the muttering grew to a grumbling, and the grumbling grew to a mighty rumbling, and out of the houses the rats came tumbling. Great rats, small rats, lean rats, brawny rats, brown rats, black rats, gray rats, tawny rats, grave old plotters, gay young friskers, fathers, mothers, uncles, cousins, cocking tails and pricking whiskers, families by tens and dozens, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, followed the piper for their lives. From street to street he piped advancing, and step for step they followed dancing, until they came to the river Weser, wherein all plunged and perished, save one, who, stout as Julius Caesar, swam across and lived to carry to Ratland home his commentary, which was,
At the first shrill notes of the pipe, I heard a sound as of scraping tripe, and putting apples wondrous ripe into a cider press's gripe. And it seemed as if a voice called out, Ooh, rats rejoice! And just as a bulky sugar punch and already staved like a great sun shone glorious scarce an inch before me, just as methought it said, Come bore me, I found the Weezer rolling o'er me.
You should have heard the Hamelin people ringing the bells till they rocked the steeple. Go, cried the mayor, and get long poles. Poke out the nests and block up the holes. Consult with carpenters and builders and leave in our town not even a trace of the rats. When suddenly, up the face of the piper perked in the marketplace with a, First, if you please, my 1,000 guilders. 1,000 guilders? The mayor looked blue. So did the corporation, too. To pay this sum to a wandering fellow with a gypsy coat of red and yellow? Beside, quoth the mayor with a knowing wink, our business was done at the river's brink. We saw with our eyes the vermin sink, and what's dead can't come to life, I think. So, friend, we're not the folks to shrink from the duty of giving you something for drink and a matter of money to put in your poke, but as for the guilders, what we spoke of them, as you very well know, was in joke. Beside, our losses have made us thrifty. 1,000 guilders. Come, take 50. The piper's face fell, and he cried, No trifling. I can't wait. Beside, I've promised to visit by dinner time Baghdad and accept the prime of the head cook's pottage. All he is rich in, for having left in the caliph's kitchen of a nest of scorpions no survivor. With him I prove no bargain driver. With you, don't think I'll bait a stiver. And folks who put me in a passion may find me piped to another fashion.
Ha, 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 cried the mayor. Do you think I'll brook being worse treated than a cook? Insulted by a lazy ribald with idle pipe and vesture piebald? You threaten us, fellow? Do your worst. Blow your pipe there till you burst.
Once more he stepped into the street, and to his lips again laid his long pipe of smooth, straight cane. And ere he blew 3 notes, such sweet, soft notes as yet musicians cunning never gave the enraptured air, there was a rustling that seemed like a bustling of merry crowds justling at pitching and hustling. Small feet were pattering, wooden shoes clattering, little hands clapping and little tongues chattering. And like fowls in a farmyard when barley is scattering, out came the children running. All the little boys and girls with rosy cheeks and flaxen curls and sparkling eyes and teeth like pearls, tripping and skipping, ran merrily after the wonderful music with shouting and laughter. The mayor was dumb, and the council stood as if they were changed into blocks of wood, unable to move a step, or cry to the children merrily skipping by, and could only follow with the eye that joyous crowd at the piper's back. But how the mayor was on the rack and the wretched council's bosoms beat as the piper turned from the high street to where the Weezer rolled its waters right in the way of their sons and daughters. However, he turned from south to west, and to Koppelberg Hill his steps addressed, and after him the children pressed. Great was the joy in every breast. He never can cross that mighty top. He's forced to let the piping drop, and we shall see our children stop. When lo, as they reached the mountain's side, a wondrous portal opened wide, as if a cavern was suddenly hollowed, and the piper advanced and the children followed. And when all were in to the very last, the door in the mountainside shut fast. Did I say all? No. One was lame and could not dance the whole of the way. And in after years, if you would blame his sadness, he was used to say, It's dull in our town since my playmates left,
I can't forget that I am bereft of all the pleasant sights they see, which the piper also promised me. For he led us, he said, to a joyous land joining the town and just at hand, where waters gushed and fruit trees grew, and flowers put forth a fairer hue, and everything was strange and new. The sparrows were brighter than peacocks here, and their dogs outran our fallow deer, and honeybees had lost their stings, and horses were born with eagles' wings. And just as I became assured my lame foot would be speedily cured, the music stopped, and I stood still and found myself outside the hill, left alone against my will, to go now limping as before and never hear of that country more. Alas, alas for Hamelin. The mayor sent east, west, north, and south to offer the piper by word of mouth wherever it was men's lot to find him, silver and gold to his heart's content, if he'd only return the way he went and bring the children behind him. But then they saw 'twas a lost endeavor, and piper and dancers were gone forever. They wrote the story on a column, and on the great church window painted the same, to make the world acquainted how their children were stolen away. And there it stands to this very day. And I must not omit to say that in Transylvania there's a tribe of alien people that ascribe the outlandish ways and dress on which their neighbors lay such stress to their fathers and mothers having risen out of some subterraneous prison into which they were trepanned long time ago in a mighty band out of Hamelin town in Brunswick land. But how or why, they don't understand. So, Willie, let you and me be wipers of scores out with all men, especially pipers, and whether they pipe us free from rats or from mice, if we've promised them aught, let us keep our promise.